Hello, monster lovers, and welcome once again to the Mask Fan Attic. With your host, me, the old creep who can't get to sleep, Dr. Lady. This week, in the filthy ruins of the attic, we have a very obscure mask. Now, forgive me, but, well, ordinarily, I like to bring masks to your attention that you actually have a chance of finding. You know, old masks that were in production for a while, or, well, that at least a few copies of exist. At least we're in, production for a short time in any limited quantity, and I usually tell you, check around, check eBay and the various mask forums and stuff if you find a mask here in the attic that you just have to have. Well, forgive me, but tonight's mask is one you're not very likely to find, because for one reason or another, it's what we experts call a one-off. That's because there's only one of them in existence. That's right. And it's this obscenity right here. Hand of Death. What the heck is Hand of Death, you may ask? Well, Hand of Death was a movie that came out in 1962, all right? And apparently was initially only shown right then when it was brand new in 1962. And well, it was considered a lost film for many years. Something like 4 decades, you could not see the movie Hand of Death. So if you were a kid growing up in the 1960s or 70s or 80s and you were looking through the old monster movie magazines and so forth, you might have seen stills of this thing here. But you couldn't see the movie. It just, no one knew where it was, and it was just considered a lost film. And then one day, I believe in 2002 or thereabouts, inauspiciously and with no fanfare, suddenly a broadcast TV event occurred. It was on television, and then everybody had seen it who had been wanting to see it all those years, and all of a sudden, I guess, it wasn't really lost. It was just such a lousy film that nobody bothered to show it for 40 years. We finally got to see it then, and since 2002, of course, it's gone on. Better prints have been uncovered and shown, and DVDs have come out and everything else. But it's one of those movies that a lot of kids who were monster fans wanted to see it, and then imagine our group disappointment when we finally got to see it all those years later, and we found out, to our chagrin, that it was less than an hour long, and it has about enough plot to fill maybe 6 or 7 minutes of its brief 58 minutes, and that nothing in it really makes any sense. However, that said, even with everything that's wrong with the movie Hand of Death, I'm pretty sure that it would have scared the bejabbers out of me when I was a kid if I had seen it all those years ago, because there are a few scenes in it that are kind of disturbing and creepy. When this guy turns around and it goes from being a normal human, well, or as normal a human as John Agar is playing anyway, to this monstrosity, it's pretty shocking. And there's a really creepy and suspenseful sequence where there's a girl in a house and this thing is trying to get in, and he's like right outside, and you see the big shadow. And I know that would have scared me really badly when I was a kid, so it's a shame I didn't get to see it then. But anyway, the story here in Hand of Death is that John Agar plays the most inept and clumsy scientist imaginable, who is experimenting with all these weird nerve gas chemicals for warfare. And in an accident that really could only look any sillier if Shemp Howard from the Three Stooges had been performing it, he spills chemicals all over himself because, yeah, that's right, government experts in toxic nerve gases don't wear protective gloves or anything like that. So yeah, just have open bottles of horrible poisons right in front of them. But anyway, John Agar manages to spill the weird chemicals on himself, and almost immediately starts to turn into a big charcoal briquette in a trench coat. And this is what he looks like. And there was some speculation for many years as to whether the character of the Thing from the Fantastic Four, Ben Grimm, was maybe inspired by this movie, because they look pretty similar. However, I believe the jury was out for a long time, but I believe the final verdict was that the Fantastic Four premiered with Ben Grimm in it before this movie was made, shortly before, like a year or two before. So we can't make that connection. No. And I doubt that they really had Ben Grimm in mind when they came up with this for the movie. What happens is the guy swells up and becomes all puffy and burning, and he's all burning inside, and if he touches people, they die. And speaking of the Three Stooges, who I referenced a minute ago when I said Shemp Howard's name, one of his victims in the movie is none other than Joe Besser, the third Stooge. After Curly and then Shemp, then there was Joe. Joe shows up in Hand of Death long enough to get killed. Also showing up long enough to not do much of anything but annoy the audience is a very young pre-Munsters Butch Patrick as a kid. Now again, the movie is not good. They couldn't think of an ending. They just have him get gunned down and there it's over. Roll the credits, which is the way a lot of cheese log movies ended back in the day. But there are some interesting aspects to it, including its insane music score. I don't know of any other movie, even from this era, that has this crazy sort of theremin and bongo drums soundtrack going on while there's a monster running around growling and killing people. And by the way, this thing runs around in the streets and nobody gives him a second look. Nobody really notices anything wrong with this guy. He wears a trench coat and a fedora, and he runs around going, "Rah!" And nobody really pays any attention to that, so I don't know what they thought. But anyway, this mask done in 2010 by the amazing Eric Shearer, better known to his mask collecting friends and fans as Maskatron. Now, the old Maskatron was inspired to do this again in 2010, and I know that because it says EPS 10 right on the back, and that's his initials, and then the 10 for 2010. But unfortunately, the mold went the way of all flesh. Let's observe a moment of silence for the mold to the poor Maskatron Hand of Death sculpture, which only yielded one, count it, copy, which you see before you here in the attic. And well, obviously nobody else has one of these, but I show you these things because you're my friend and you come here every week to see the rare and strange scary oddities from the world of masks, and it doesn't get any odder than the one-of-a-kind Hand of Death. Join me again next week, and well, until then, he and I will see you in your nightmares.